Powell River.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. I'm very happy to stand here today to speak on Motion 166 as a representative of North Island Powell River. This motion is really important to my riding. It is to set a special committee to study postal banking and propose a system of delivery under Canada Post. I think I would like to also just thank the member of London Fanshawe for her hard work on this important file. And I also want to recognize the postal workers across my riding who work so hard every day to deliver the mail and make sure that people in our community are connected. And a special thank you to the CUPW members. Madam Speaker, as a representative of a rural and remote community, I am often very disappointed by the lack of services that go to some of our more remote communities. You know, I think of Holberg, Gold River, Sontula, Tassis, who are communities that are working very hard to be strong in a changing economy. And I think of Gold River specifically, who lost access to banking in their community a while back and soon after lost their grocery store. Madam Speaker, if you come to my riding and you see the vast amount of people living in more rural and remote communities, if you look and you understand the roads and the length of time it takes to get to a community, it can be a real barrier when you don't have access to a bank. So people who are struggling financially are having to take that long journey to get food, to go and do their banking, and it just adds more stress to those communities. I think about how expensive gas is getting too as well, Madam Speaker. And when we talk about what do our public services provide, it's really about looking at how do we make services accessible, how do we make sure that people don't get left behind, and how do we remember that rural and remote communities have a right to exist, and that really our job is to look at how everyone across our country is doing and making sure that there's opportunities. Madam Speaker, small communities matter. We know that about almost 1,200 communities across Canada have no bank at all, no credit union, but they do have a post office. It seems to me that this is a very important discussion about how we make sure that those services are accessible, how do we look at those small communities and the vitality of them, and what can we do to remove some of the burdens that so often are placed on those communities. I think it's also really important to look at how we keep money in the community. Postal banking is working. It's a job. So there are some communities that would really benefit from having those jobs locally within their community. And it's also working in other countries. So some examples are France, New Zealand, and Italy, where they're having this model a little bit different for each country, looking at the needs that they have, but they're successful. They're creating revenue. They're making sure the services are more accessible to people across their country and to different groups. So why not have an opportunity to look at creating a revenue stream for Canada Post, as well as looking at the opportunity to create meaningful work in some of our communities that so desperately need them. Madam Speaker, just recently I went to Port Hardy and Port McNeill in my riding, and I did another round of town halls on the disability tax credit. I've been very proud to do many of them across the riding and looking forward to doing several other communities in the next few months. This is very important because one of the challenges that some of our smaller communities have is accessing the ability to save money through this program for their children, for themselves, to look at the future, putting away for their retirement savings plan. And part of it is their lack of banking services. So this is also about looking at how do we make sure that these services that the federal government provides are delivered in so many of these communities that desperately need them. It's just wrong, Madam Speaker, to have people who have already faced different challenges also lose this opportunity. We also know that a lack to access to banking has a significant impact on the people who are the poorest in this country. If we are talking about improving access for women and economic independence for them, we need to be looking at how does this intersect with that reality. Too many small communities continue to struggle. We know that what they need is a helping hand so that they can look at the opportunities that are around them. But if they're struggling with the main essentials of trying to find a way to have a bank, losing their grocery stores, it just makes it that much harder for small business to be successful. So it's about making sure that we're looking at fairness across our country as well. We know that payday lenders across Canada are problematic because most of the people who access this service are usually low income, and they can get further and further into debt. So this is also about making sure that we have services accessible to people, that it's walkable. You know, the last member talked about how a lot of post offices are just not used in the same way. Well, I've stood in many lineups in the post office in my riding, and it's a very busy place with a lot of people accessing. It's also close to downtown. It's also close to buses. It's really available for people who need it. So I think this is an important thing to be looking at. Small communities just deserve and need more opportunities to thrive, and this will open so many doors. We know that 29 municipalities across British Columbia have supported this type of banking. We know when municipalities are telling us that there's a gap, that there's a need that needs to be met, it's something we need to listen to. You know, we're here in Ottawa. We are not there on the ground every day as so many municipal leaders are. So working and listening to municipalities just makes plain sense to me, Madam Speaker. I also just wanted to briefly mention one of the postal offices in my riding at the Merville General Store right now. And when I look at this opportunity, I think about that store and how they haven't been paid their rent in 53 months from Canada Post. So there's a lot of work to do there. We want to make sure that people get paid their rent on time in a timely fashion, $210 a month, to provide an access to a service that is much needed in that area. Just makes sense. It doesn't make sense to me that Canada Post is not paying its bills. So there's a lot of work to be done here, but when we look at these banking opportunities, when we look at the realities of rural and remote communities, when we look at the realities of people who are struggling in poverty, feeling forced to use the payday lenders, when we look at some communities that are very far away from a bank, even if it's in an urban setting, sometimes there's neighborhoods where people just can't get to a bank. We know that online banking is a part of that, and I appreciate the work being done there. But at the same time, I think of so many communities that I represent that have no access to cells, where they have very limited access to internet. So we have to look at those communities because they do matter. And we need to be talking about them, and we need to be looking at their needs, and we need to be looking at how we can alleviate some of the stress so they have opportunities to do better. So I hope that the members in this House will put aside their thoughts that are really not looking at the needs of so many communities across this country and ask this hard question, and let us do the research so that we can have a plan that makes sense for everyday Canadians. Thank you so much, Madam Speaker.